Welcome and thank you so much for coming to this online conference. This is the second IGAC-iCACGP Early Career Researcher online conference. So we organised the first one of these 2 years ago, and it was a great success, and it has run sort of in the off years of the in-person IGAC conference. So we are really grateful that we are able to offer this, because it means that a lot of people who might otherwise be unable to make the IGAC in-person conference are able to attend and present their brilliant work. So thank you so much for coming. We've got a really, really great afternoon or day or evening, depending on your time zone, of talks and sessions for you today. So just a little bit about us. This is the conference committee, so the early career researchers that have been involved with organising this conference, and where we are all based and come from. So there's a big range here. We've got a really global committee, and it has been really amazing to be able to have such a broad range of researchers, because we've been able to organise this 20-hour extravaganza of a conference by staggering ourselves across time zones. And just to quickly introduce myself, I'm Hannah, and I'm a postdoc at the University of Edinburgh. So what is IGAC-iCACGP is a great question that I'm sure some of you have been wondering what all these acronyms are. This is our attempt at explaining it. So this is sort of the family tree of where these two acronyms came from. So we can start at the International Science Council, and then we can follow the path of that to the International Union of Geodesy and Geophysics, or IUGG. And then that sort of has an offshoot called IAMAS, the International Association of Meteorology and Atmospheric Sciences. And we're very grateful to IAMAS, who are one of our sponsors for today's event and are part of what has made this whole thing possible. And then we have ICACGP, so that's one of the acronyms in the title, the International Commission of Atmospheric Chemistry and Global Pollution. And then from that, we have IGAC, the International Global Atmospheric Chemistry group, which has been around for 35 years and is a really great organisation to be a part of. We've also got listed two of the sister organisations, so SOLAS and iLeaps. And these are looking at surface ocean and land and ecosystem, respectively. And if you feel like maybe your research might fit into one of these groups as well, I'd really encourage you to have a look in the Gather Town main hall space at the poster boards, because they've both got some information up about how you can get involved and what they do. And some of it aligns with IGAC, some of it is separate events. So please have a look at that. And I will pass to Simone.
Hi, everyone. I'm Simone. I'm a postdoc at the Max Planck Institute in Germany. And then I also have the honor of co-chairing the IGAC-iCACGP Early Career Researchers Scientific Steering Committee, which is also a global committee where you can see the people who are currently part of it on the screen. We organize workshops or seminars every month, and we have a newsletter trying to shine a light on early career researchers and what they do in atmospheric chemistry. So we try to give new opportunities to ECRs. And one of these opportunities that we're very excited to announce is that we're having our own grant, which is going to have its first open call in October this year. So you can apply for seed funding to support your research, going to conferences or summer school. So look out for more information on that. We also will be recruiting new members for the 2026 committee. So you should also look out for that if you want to get involved in one of these global networks and get to know a lot more ECR researchers from all over the world. And both of these opportunities will be advertised more in our newsletter. So if you've not already signed up for a newsletter, use the QR code in the corner to sign up for it. There will also be in the next newsletter the advertisement for our upcoming workshop in the end of October, where Colleen from OpenAQ is going to talk about how we can use OpenAQ for air quality research and applications. And then, of course, please follow us on all our social media and check out the website where You have also been able to stay updated on the conference this time around. So I think, yeah, stay in touch. We look forward to it. So for the rest of today, we are going to start now with all of these highlight talks. We're currently doing the welcome, and then we're going to move on to the side meeting room where we're going to have the icebreaker, the skills workshop, and a networking activity. And then for those who are interested, there's a LACES side meeting. So this is a Latin America Earth. Oh, can't remember the rest of the acronym. Side meeting where you can go and talk to the people who are organizing that. For this highlight talk, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A, and then someone will read them out loud to the speakers. And for the rest of the activities, please turn on your camera and microphone and take part in all the sessions. If you have any problems in GatherTown, find any of us that have organizing committee written, as you can see on the picture on the right. There's no more poster evaluations, so I will skip that. But please network with all the people that you meet, have fun, and yeah, hopefully you will learn something new with these next few sessions. Today's invited speakers, you can see here. I will let Juliana introduce them later when we get to that, and then we will have a workshop on Microsoft Copilot with Dr. Elke Walsh later on. And back to you, Hannah.
Just a little overview of GatherTown, which I'm sure some of you have been already in for the poster session previously. We apologise for this very grainy screenshot, but hopefully you can still make out the main section. So in the centre, we have the main hall, where you'll find lots of posters and links and ways to get involved with various working groups, activities. Our funders are all sort of down at the bottom. There's some boards on about what they are doing, and we'd really encourage you to have a look at these because some of them are area specific or topic specific, and you might just find something that aligns exactly with your research, which would be great to get involved with. And then to the left, there's the side meeting room, which is where you're going to go for the networking and icebreaker session. And then we're currently in the plenary, and then there's the poster room if you do want to have a look at any posters during the breaks and things like that. If you are struggling to interact with the board, just press the X on your keyboard and that should bring it up. And then, just finally, these are our sponsors for the conference today. We've had so much great support from these sponsors, and it has meant that we are able to offer poster prizes, and we're offering 6 poster prizes. And it will include the travel, accommodation, and the registration fees to the IGAC 2026 conference in Greece next year. So this is an amazing set of prizes to offer, and we are just very grateful that we're able to do that. So without further ado, we're going to pass you on to the highlight talks. So thank you, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's here. Thank you for attending. I hope you have great highlight talks that you learn a lot. So our first invited speaker would be Dr. Glenn Chua. He's a NASA postdoctoral fellow working at NASA Goddard Institute for Space Study. Today, his research is exploring climate lightning fire atmospheric composition interaction in a chemistry climate model with a focus on hydroxyl radicals. So, Dr. Glenn Shoa, the floor is yours. Welcome. You can share your screen.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can
Um,
hear you.
cool. Yeah, let me just put my go on slideshow. Um, so okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see you.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So, okay, I'll start. Hi everyone. My name is Glenn Chua, and I'm currently a postdoc, NASA postdoctoral program postdoc at the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies. And today, well, my topic is still roughly around like what I was introduced to talk, but it's taken on a different packaging now. And so kind of focusing on the hydroxyl radical response to climate change and highlighting the importance of Earth system processes. And I'll go through that, what all this means in a bit. So, next slide. So, what is the hydroxyl radical? The hydroxyl radical plays a central role in atmospheric chemistry because it is the primary atmospheric oxidant. It's also known as the atmospheric detergent. It was a term that was coined by Paul Crutzen, famously Nobel Prize winner in atmospheric chemistry, and that kind of term has kind of stuck since then. And why is it called a detergent? It's because it removes many atmospheric pollutants. And in fact, it is the major sink of important greenhouse gas, methane. So again, why one key reason why it's important, methane. Methane is a major greenhouse gas. It's kind of the second most largest contributor to effective radiative forcing. So climate. Also, methane is a tropospheric ozone precursor. You have health impacts there because ozone is a air pollutant. And um, atmospheric methane is still increasing. In the past few decades, it's already increased by like 300 ppb and going. And about 90% of methane is lost by reaction with OH. So understanding how OH changes can help us understand methane evolution. So just a quick overview of to understand how OH is changing, kind of need a brief overview of the key chemistry. And so for all the OH chemistry people out there, like this is very, very simplified. So please let this slide. But so OH is produced from what we call primary production. So tropospheric ozone in the presence of water vapor and UV light produces OH, and that's how like radicals follow the sun. But then when OH is produced, then it reacts with many, many different things. As I mentioned, OH is a sink for many, many different gases. For example, it's lost through reaction with methane, other volatile organic compounds such as isoprene, and also the major sink is carbon monoxide and other sinks as well. And then when it produces this thing called the hydroperoxy radical, it can then be recycled to reproduce OH again from the presence of stuff like NOx in polluted environments and also ozone in non-polluted environments. And so you can see like there are many different things that affect OH both as a source and a sink. Um, so one of the drivers of OH is climate change. And the reason is because climate change affects all those different drivers around OH as we saw just now. But how does the net effect of climate change affect OH? Understanding this is pretty important because firstly, how OH changes with climate change can constitute a climate feedback by affecting lifetime of greenhouse gases such as methane. And again, like whether this feedback is positive or negative depends on whether OH increases or decreases with climate change. And also, because OH is so central to all aspects of atmospheric chemistry, how it changes with climate change is therefore a key chemistry-climate coupling. So kind of like linking chemistry and climate very intricately in the oxidant sense. Um, and so a bunch of earlier studies have offered a simplified parameterization of how to understand OH, and I kind of boxed them up together um, to match the diagram that I had before. But you basically have in the numerator factors that affect primary production. So basically like the photolysis frequencies, water vapor, tropospheric ozone. In the numerator as well, you have the terms that affect what we call the recycling, so stuff like the NOx burden or emissions. And then on the denominator, you have all the factors that affect losses, like methane, CO, and then the volatile organic compounds. And um, all of these are functions of temperature, basically. And so how do these different drivers respond to climate change? That's also a key question. So, um, like the current like sort of like understanding of like how climate like affects OH is as follows. You have increased temperatures, you have increased water vapor. That's like a Clausius-Clapeyron sort of relationship, and then that leads to increased OH. And that was like first kind of highlighted on the IPCC level in 2007. And this was the main process that has like that happens, and so that's kind of primarily what people understand as climate impacts on OH, that it leads to increase in OH due to increase in water vapor. However, um, that's not the only factor that's changing. And so like there are many other processes that are changing as well with increased climate and so then how do those affect OH? So um, what I did to try to dig deeper into this like question was dig into the CMIP6 multi-model ensemble. And I basically analyzed experiments where CO2 is held constant versus CO2 is increasing. And so that allows me to isolate the quite a pure signal of like a climate change signal for OH and related quantities. And I have 5 models that I analyzed that have provided enough data to analyze. So the first quantity that I looked at was global mean surface temperature, so GNST. You can see that it kind of maps pretty well with how like the CO2 is changing in the different scenarios. So the bold lines are the purple bold line is the 4 times CO2 multi-model mean, yellow bold line is the 1% CO2, and then the dotted black line is the pre-industrial control. And so the increase is about like, like about 3 to 4 Kelvin-ish by the end of the time period, 150 years. And then how does this map onto OH changes? So across the 5 models, like OH generally increases with increased CO2, like, and I've showing the results for both all the different runs, and you can see like most of the models except the GFDL model, which is this green one here, like it doesn't really show a signal. All the others show that OH does increase with CO2. However, like kind of breaking it down into like how much increase in OH happens per degree of warming. And on the left, I derived that from the 4 times CO2 experiment. On the right, I derived it from the 1% CO2 like gradient. And you can see like firstly, both of them like the numbers on both sides match pretty well. But the main thing that I want to highlight here is that there's quite a large intermodal spread. You can see like how much OH changes with every degree of warming, like the yellow bar being the multi-model mean, like the standard error is really large, and you can see like some models, like the GFDL model, actually shows a negative relationship with increased temperature, and then the magnitudes are all a little different. So, like, what I found explains this is the how Earth system processes are changing in these models. So kind of highlighting the importance of some of these Earth system responses, for example, lightning NOx emissions. As I mentioned earlier, NOx tends to be a source of OH, and lightning tends to be a particularly effective source of OH because of the altitude of its emissions as well as the lack of co-emitted species. Um, Meanwhile, the BVOC emissions tend to be an OH sink because it helps to recycle OH back towards the hydroperoxy radical. And actually, like some studies have associated increasing the excessively high isoprene emissions in 2020 contributed about 15% of the methane lifetime increase in that year. And so kind of putting this in a little bit of a schematic here, like how do the Earth system processes connect the climate and chemistry here with lightning and BVOC emissions that you consider. So in the CMIP6 ensemble, on the left-hand side, I'm showing lightning, how lightning changes with increasing temperature. So most models show increasing lightning NOx with increased temperature, um, except for the GFDL model, which shows a decrease. Meanwhile, for isoprene emissions, like only 3 models have the climate interactive BVOC emissions, and for those that do have interactive BVOC emissions, it tends to increase with global mean surface temperature as well. Um, but how do these relate to OH changes? So I kind of tried to plot it in a scatter plot with the color codes showing the OH changes, and the y-axis is isoprene change, and the x-axis is lightning Knox change. And so basically what I'm trying to show here is that lightning Knox and the BVOC response to climate change can explain some of the intermodal differences in the OH response to climate change. So in the GFDL model, you have lightning Knox decreasing and isoprene emissions increasing the most. Like it goes up most vertical, and like lightning goes negative, and you see OH tends to decrease as in it goes more blue, the color, the dots. For the GIST model, lightning Knox increases the most, but also the isoprene emissions increases a lot. And in this case, the OH increases, but the rate of increase is slightly slower. It kind of goes from blue towards the warmer red colors more slowly. For the UK ESM, the lightning Knox emission increases like a little like smaller than the GIST model, and the isoprene emissions increase at a slower rate than GIST or GFDL model, and then you see the OH goes towards redder colors more rapidly. And lastly, the EC-ERF model like goes towards red the most rapidly, even though the lightning Knox increase is small, and but it has no isoprene emissions. So basically there's no increase in the sink. So it's kind of like highlighting like lightning and isoprene changes kind of explain some of these. And furthermore, you can see like signs of the isoprene and lightning in the altitude and latitudinally resolved bins. So on the x-axis, I've kind of binned it by extra tropical southern hemisphere, tropical northern hemisphere, and extra tropical northern hemisphere. And then for different altitude bins. So surface 750 to 500 hectopascals, 500 to 250, and 250 to 100. So kind of the bottom row basically is like near surface. And you can see near the surface, models that have the interactive isoprene tends to have a decrease in OH with increasing temperatures. Whereas as you start going higher up, then you can start seeing like the signals of the lightning signal. For example, you can see very clearly with the GFDL model, like lightning's where lightning is decreasing. You can see like in the upper atmosphere where lightning tends to be most effective, like OH tends to decrease there too. So the summary so far is that OH generally increases with increased CO2, but there are intermodal differences in the behavior. And these intermodal differences can be related to intermodal differences in the CO2 response of lightning Knox and biogenic VOCs. Now, another important climate responsive Earth system feature that is not featured in the CMA6 models are fires. And so wildfires emit many species that have A, different lifetimes, and so they have different geographical altitudinal spread, and B, the different species have different effects on OH too. So kind of a very simple schematic here that I have. Some of the shorter lived species, like Knox, have a more limited um, area of impact around the fire source, and some of the other compounds like carbon monoxide have longer lifetime and get transported a little further. And red tends to be OH sinks, and then the blue, like Knox, tend to be OH sources. And then so kind of highlighting some studies that have highlighted the effects of the fire emissions on OH. Um, Tan et al. Found fires enhance OH locally, decrease OH further away. Zhao et al. Found that the years that have very small fire amounts of fires due to La Nina, you get OH increasing, and then large fire years tend to lead to decreasing OH, and they find that that's mostly due to the carbon monoxide signal. And so kind of adding fire there to the mix of the Earth system processes, um, like oh uh, in addition to lightning and BVOC emissions, how does the addition of fires add to this picture? And I actually designed some experiments using the GIST Model E to do a deep dive on the relative importance of these processes on OH and then methane lifetime too. So what I did was I isolated the role of these individual Earth system processes on the climate response of OH. So I used the same CO2 forcing protocol as in those earlier CMIP6 experiments, the PI control and a scenario where the CO2 concentrations are quadrupled abruptly. And then, so over here, kind of showing that. But then for each of these CO2 experiments, I then run for about 50 years and then analyze the last 20 after the model has kind of like reached equilibrium-ish. A base case scenario, and then also experiments where I isolate the impact of increased CO2 on lightning, BVOC, and fires. And how I did that was like I systematically set these different quantities as constant. So then don't allow them to respond to climate change, and then take the difference to see how the particular quantity impacts OH and methane lifetime. So in the GIST model E, all these three quantities are increasing with increased CO2. So both all lightning knocks, isoprene emissions, and fires are increasing. And how do these affect OH? So in the base case, as we mentioned earlier in the CMIP6 ensemble, the GIST model shows a OH increasing with increased CO2. But with only lightning, you see that OH actually increases like a lot more um, because like you don't have like the function of like some of the sinks like BVOC emissions as we mentioned. Um, so interestingly, fires actually global mean have a positive impact on OH. And as I explain later, when you look at spatial breakdown, why that is, but it's mostly because fire NOx emissions are increasing too locally. Um, and then the BVOC emissions have a big, like, sort of like negative impact on OH. And then the net effect of the Earth system, like, processes is like pretty similar to the base case. And so it really, really highlights in the GIST model, like, um, the net effect of other climate responsive features is comparatively small compared to the Earth system processes. Um, and so regionally, now that's another area that I can look at is in the base case, you have OH increasing in the tropics, but then it decreases in the extratropics. Um, and with lightning only, it increases everywhere, but mostly higher over the tropics. With fires, you see like regional areas of increase over source areas, but then a smaller background decrease, especially over the southern hemisphere. And then with the BVOC emissions, you see OH decreases in most regions and mostly over the like land source areas with vegetation. And so you can kind of see like overall it again highlights the like superposition of like all the Earth system processes like kind of like dominates kind of like the climate response of the OH. I kind of looked at it from more vertical resolution as well. So a zonal mean plot of the base OH shows that you increase mostly in the middle troposphere, decreases near the surface, and that kind of matches what happens with lightning in terms of where the increases are happening the most. Um, and then for fires, you actually see small increases near like the surface over like land areas, but then like you see decreases in higher altitude and remote areas due to the longer lived like sink emissions. And then lastly, the BVOC emissions tend to decrease near the surface. And then you see some larger decreases in the tropical middle troposphere, suggesting that some of the like BVOC emissions are effectively being transported up in the middle troposphere. So oh, sorry, this is a repeated slide. And then lastly, I kind of asked a question of like what happens effects on methane lifetime. So the methane lifetime effects are largely the inverse of changes in OH, and the additional, you have increased OH with increased lightning, and that leads to larger decrease in methane lifetime. And vice same for fires, increase OH, decrease methane lifetime, and then BVOC decrease OH, increase methane lifetime. And then there's a little bit of a gap between the net and the base case, and that comes from the climate change has an additional impact on the loss reaction rate there. So overall, the conclusions are that the Earth system processes are important to understand how OH changes with climate change. And they are particularly explaining intermodal differences in the behavior. And these intermodal differences can be related to intermodal differences in CO2 response of lightning knocks and BVOCs. And in the GIS model E, lightning and BVOC dominate the climate response of OH, and fires play a minor role globally with different local and non-local effects on OH. I think my time is up. I have 20 minutes. I have a bunch of like
Yeah.
the further work slides that I don't think I'll be able to get to. But I just want to put my acknowledgements up. I acknowledge people that I've worked with at GIS, particularly Susanna Bauer, Kostas Sigaridis, and Karen Mezuman, and also some people at Columbia, Lorenzo Polvani and Gus Correa, and as well as my NASA postdoctoral program funding. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for your time. And please
Thank you so
email
much,
me
Dr.
if you have
Glenn.
questions. Yeah, thanks.
Just a reminder, we have question and answer. So you can drop your questions if anyone has it. I do have a question about fires. So I'm guessing you're using like number of fires for the modeling, but what about like area? Like we know that fires can be increasing their area with time. So what do you think could be the effect of the increasing area
Yeah,
on
so
you?
I think I have a so basically in the Model E currently fires does not interact with the vegetation, so that is one area of limitation that kind of limits the ability to like model some of the like fire areas spread, and also like kind of time evolution of fires to um and also like the in these scenarios like land use change is also not really changing, and so then because it's all like in the pre-industrial world, like really
Yeah.
just trying to capture the pure CO2 signal. So yeah, like there are some of the challenges to modeling that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Glenn. We'll move towards our next speaker. Um, yeah, I think you can stop sharing. Okay, so hello everyone. Just a reminder, we have our question and answer box. You can drop them there. And our next speaker, it's our PhD candidate, Ayomid Ekandi from the University of British Columbia. Her research today would be about cashmeran. A synthetic moss compound is a fragrant volatile chemical product tracer in urban air quality. So welcome, Dr. Ayomid. The floor is yours. You can share your screen.
Sorry, give me a minute. Here you go. Okay. Can you see my screen okay now?
Yes, we can see.
Okay.
Oh, no.
No, you
We
see the presenter view?
yeah,
Okay. Let's just do this then.
yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
That's good. Okay. Um, all right. Hi everyone. My name is Ayomide Akande. I am a PhD candidate, so not a doctor yet, but hopefully soon. At the University of British Columbia, and I work in the NVD group here in Canada. I'll be talking to you today about my favorite molecule, or at least a molecule I've had to think about a lot through my PhD, which is cashmeran, and I will talk about some of the ways we've used mass spec to try and figure out the atmospheric fate of this compound. However, before I start, I would like to acknowledge that all the work that I've done is done at UBC, which is the traditional, unceded, and ancestral homeland of the Musqueam indigenous people. Given the crowd I'm talking to, I don't have to, argue much that VOC is important from an air quality and climate perspective, but I think it's worth iterating. VOCs are important. They can directly or indirectly affect our climate, and our air quality, and also having health effects. And so in the environment, we use specific molecules as chemical tracers to try and track emission sources, right? So for example, if we wanted to see the contribution of vehicles or traffic emission, we would track things like toluene and benzene, because they're known tracers for traffic emissions. And so what I have shown here is just a couple emission sources. So we have the biogenic traffic, cocaine emissions, personal care products, paints, and cleaners. And today I want to focus on, today I want to focus on this group of compounds that are called volatile chemical products. And these are essentially consumer products that are used almost every day. So they include things like paints and coatings, personal care products, fragrances, among others. And the reason why this is important is because there's this paper from 2018 by Brian McDonald et al. That showed that as we have continued to clean up the traffic emissions from traffic by stricter regulations and cleaner fuels, we are reducing the VOC emission from that factor, but then we're having volatile chemical products contribute disproportionately to the total VOC load in the environment. And so a question is, where are they from? What are they doing? And for my PhD, I focus specifically on cashmeran, which if you've not heard of before, and that's very likely, it is a synthetic MOX compound that is used in fragrance VCPs, particularly personal care products. So things like perfumes, shampoo, conditioners, among others. And the reason why I focus on cashmeran is, one, we have found it to be dominant in MOX smelling consumer products. So we literally bought a perfume in the lab and sprayed it and looked at the composition and found cashmeran to be one of the highest MOX smelling compounds in there. We know that it is unique to source, so there's no naturally occurring source of cashmeran in the environment. It is synthetic, and it is mostly or always produced to be used as fragrance. So it's kind of very specific to this fragrance VCP. And we've also found it to be detected in multiple media. So I'm showing just the screenshots from a paper we published earlier this year and did a literature review. And cashmeran has been identified in air, in aquatic systems, and even in humans. And since we mostly use this indoors, there could be an implication for exposure. And also, like I just talked about with VCPs, it could also be impacting urban air pollution. And so the overall question I'm asking in my PhD is, can we constrain the fate of cashmeran in the environment? And to do that, I ask sub-questions. First, I think about the chemical kinetics. So how fast does it react against ozone and OH radical? And then I think about this indoor-outdoor transport process. And thinking about, can we identify it outside? And overall, which I will probably not get to in the slide, is the big picture is then thinking about this life cycle analysis from the perspective, thinking of its emission, its fate and its lifetime, and environmental observation. And so before I go on to the actual research, I'd like to talk about the instrumentation I use, which is called the Vocus-2R proton transfer reaction time-of-flight mass spectrometer, which is a mouthful, but we would often just call it either the Vocus or the Vocus-2R or the 2R in the lab, or we call it the supernose to people that are not in atmospheric chemistry and come visit in the lab. But essentially, you can think of this as a chemical ionization mass spec that uses hydronium as its reagent ion. And so what happens is, trying to find my laser. There you go. You have your analyte of interest reacting with hydronium ion, H3O+. And as long as your VOC has a higher proton affinity than water, the proton will preferentially be on the VOC, protonating it, and then you can guide it through your time of flight and detect it with the focus. And so what I do then is I take that instrument and run lab experiments where we use this 8-meter cube smog chamber in the lab, or we take it to the field, where during the course of my research, I have deployed it to an office at the department, deployed it to the boreal forest in Alaska, and also to measure BVOCs, and also Toronto in 2023 to kind of measure urban air pollution. Okay, so going back to, again, now a research question, I'm thinking of the first question with chemical kinetics. So the very first thing, I did this in the smog chamber, like I said, lab experiments. And so what we did was we introduced Kashmiran into the chamber, and you can see that signal go up as soon as we introduce it. And then I introduce ozone in excess, so we can assume pseudo first order conditions. And then I take the decay of Kashmiran to try and figure out, to calculate rather, the rate constant of Kashmiran with ozone. And what we found is a rate constant on the order of 10 to the minus 19 at room temperature, which results in a lifetime of about 85 days. So there are two implications for this study. One is that for the first time, we're reporting the rate constant of Kashmir with ozone, and also showing that the current model, because we looked at EPISWIT and what EPISWIT reports, which is 10 to the minus 18, is overestimating this rate constant. And then the second implication of this is that Kashmiran is long-lived in the environment, right? If we think of ozone as the dominant oxidant indoors and Kashmiran reacts really slowly with ozone, we expect that it is long-lived enough to be transported outside. But then the more interesting thing, or additionally interesting thing, is we introduced cyclohexane into all of our experiments. Cyclohexane, we don't expect to react with ozone, but we expect it to react with OH radical to produce cyclohexanone, which will be seen on the Vocus as C6H11O+. And what we find is this increase in cyclohexanone when we run this reaction in air, indicating the formation of secondary OH production. And so what we're showing is that the reaction of Kashmiran and ozone is slow, but then that produces secondary OH radical, which then can further affect the lifetime of Kashmiran. And so the next project I'm working on is, or experiment I should say, is really looking at then the rate constant of Kashmiran with OH radical. And the way I'm doing that is introducing trimethyl ethylene with ozone. So trimethyl ethylene will react with ozone to give off OH radical as a byproduct. And then I would then have that react with, or that would then react with Kashmiran. And then we can monitor the decay and again find the rate constants. And from preliminary experiments, so this is preliminary, I should say, we found a rate constant of about 10 to the minus 11. And also shows again that our estimates from EPISWIT is EPISWIT is overestimating the rate constants of this molecule. Okay, so now that we've established that this molecule is long-lived, we thought about two things. One is that when you spray your favorite personal care products, it's because you're about to go outside, and so it is likely outside. And then two, if it's very long-lived, even if you spray it indoors, then like how long does it live indoors and what happens to it? And so what we did was a very simple experiment where we deployed the instrument to an office space to kind of depict a room. And we had this fabric that was 100% cotton in the room. And then we sprayed the fabric with a perfume, a commercial perfume that we know to contain Kashmiran. We allowed that to sit for a while, and then we took the fabric out for about an hour and then reintroduced the fabric into the room. And essentially what I'm showing here briefly is On the top, we have the monoterpene, so C10H17 plus. And I just use the structure of limonene to kind of depict it over here. And then below we have cashmeran. And you can see that after your spray, almost 20 minutes after the monoterpenes is already back to background level, but you can see that cashmeran hangs around for more than 250 minutes. And I actually allowed this to go to see how long we'll be able to detect it for. And it went up to like 6 hours. So that tells us two things: that one, cotton is a good reservoir for cashmeran, but also two, kind of confirming this hypothesis that when you spray a personal care product that contains cashmeran, you're likely transporting it outdoors. And so we wanted to then look into urban measurements to kind of confirm this hypothesis that we are seeing this compound outside. And to do this, we reached out to NOAA as collaborators and took two of their data sets. So one from New York City in 2018 and one from Las Vegas in 2021. And this data set are very intentional. So in New York City, they were investigating the effect of consumer emissions. So they had the instruments in a mobile van and drove through the city, but also drove through the forest. So you can see what compound is specific to population emissions, and then what compounds are from forested areas. And in Vegas, well, just that if you want to study human emissions, you go to Vegas because there's a lot of us there. And so for the rest of the slides, I'm going to talk about D5-siloxane as a base, and that's because D5-siloxane is a known personal care product tracer. So the community widely uses D5-siloxane as a personal care product tracer. And so I would use that as a base and then introduce cashmeran that we're trying to, show as a fragrance tracer. And so the very first question is, did we see, a molecular formula corresponding to cashmeran? And the answer is yes. And so in this slide, I'm showing you the linear correlation between cashmeran and D5-siloxane in New York City as a function of location. And we can see this pretty good linear regression with R equals to 0.3. And then if we look at the Las Vegas experiments also, so Las Vegas, we have a lot of data, and I only picked one day to kind of show you a day that had plume events and also just kind of time of day dependence. And we have a less, we have a lower R, but we still see a good correlation again between cashmeran on the y-axis and D5-siloxane on the x-axis, telling us that cashmeran is linked to personal care products just as D5-siloxane is. And then we took the New York City data to kind of show this link to population density. So I'll just draw your attention to the top graph here. The bar graphs are population density, and then the straight line is the concentration of the VOC we are looking at. So in the black is D5-siloxane. And what you can see is that where we have more people, we have a higher concentration of D5. Again, which makes sense, which we expect, knowing that D5 is a personal care product tracer. And so now I'm introducing cashmeran also, and we see a similar correlation where we have an increase in concentration of cashmeran where we have more population density. Again, showing that cashmeran is linked to human emissions. And then finally, we had this instrument on a van again in Vegas and just drove across the city. And I'm showing now different time of days because I want to show you time of day dependence. On the top graph, we have the daytime, the bottom, we have the evening, and then the middle, we have the evening, and the bottom, we have the late night. And again, on the left axis, I'm showing cashmeran, and on the right axis, I'm showing D5. And you can see how cashmeran scales with D5 most of the time, particularly in the evening, where we expect, given the city that Las Vegas is, there to be a dominant nighttime life, and so people are likely respraying themselves and going out. And so this is kind of where we are hoping this research will lead to, where we're able to collect reported emissions, think about the lifetime and environmental observation, and then just use that to inform the fate of catamaran and its transport in the environment. Okay, in summary, I have shown that catamaran reacts slowly with ozone, but produces OH radical that can then impact that lifetime, and also shown that its reaction with OH radical is the dominant sink. And then also that catamaran can be transported outdoors and also can be detected in real time with the Vocus. And then finally, where we're trying to get to is using all of the information we've gathered to inform the fate of this compound in the environment. And with that, I would like to thank my collaborators, funding agencies, and my group says hi. And I will leave you with the summary slide, which is right here.
Thank you so much. A very interesting talk. Is there anyone in the public who wants to? There is a question, right? Okay, so Mego Reza asked what motivated calculating the lifetime of catamaran with ozone at 20 ppb. With anthropogenic sources from personal care products, would it be appropriate to consider polluted ground level ozone in urban air?
Yes, I think that's a very good question. I chose 20 ppb because I think, no, not I think, because it was it's the maximum recommended threshold indoors, for 8 hours, if I remember this correctly. And so we wanted to kind of see like a maximum threshold. But I will say that, yes, that's, that lifetime at that particular concentration, when we calculated that, we're thinking about the indoor environment, and not outdoors. So yeah, the rate constant makes more sense to think about because then you can adapt that to calculate the lifetime at any concentration.
Amazing. Another question from Julieta Juncosa. Hi, Ayo. Super interesting talk. It seems that catamaran has another peak that doesn't always align with the population density. Do you have an hypothesis of what is going on in there?
Well, I have an idea, but I'm not very sure. So D5, and I think that's this slide, this one. So D5 is linked to personal care products. We know that for sure. But not all personal care products are fragranced. Catamaran is linked to fragrances. And so we think that this is coming kind of from a discrepancy between, like fragrance products and fragrance-free products, which is becoming like an important thing recently. But of course, that might also just be due to the lifestyle of the people living there. It's really difficult to narrow that down, really.
Amazing. I think we have a space for another question. Super cool work, Ayo. A question about the oxidation of catamaran. Do you know what the products of that reaction would be? Does it make reactive species that then will go on to do further chemistry?
Yeah, so again, I haven't shown that yet, but we see the oxidation, a clear first generation oxidation product of catamaran plus 1 oxygen. So catamaran is C14H22O, and we see C14H22O2. And so we think that it is like adding on to this double bond kind of in the middle here. At that point, we don't expect it to react with ozone because now there is no, or at least competitively with ozone, because now there's no C double bond C. But of course, you can imagine that there's a lot of hydrogen here, so it could go on to react with OH radical, for example. That is the atmospheric detergent, like Dr. Chuan said. And so, yeah, it could go on to do a lot of things. We also found in our experiment that this reaction can lead to secondary organic aerosols, depending on what concentrations you use.
Well, amazing. Thank you, Ayomite, for your presentation. It was very interesting.
Thank you.
Now we can move to our next speaker. And a reminder again, you can go and drop your questions in the Q&A box. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Alejandro Casallas. Dr. Alejandro Casallas is an atmospheric scientist, and he's currently a postdoctoral fellow at the Institute of Science and Technology in Austria. His talk today it's From Flame to Fallout: Atmospheric Consequences of Amazon Biomass Burning in South America. So, Dr. Alejandro Casallas, the floor is yours. You can share your screen.
Hi, thanks for the introduction. So can you see my slides, I suppose?
Yes.
I'm in presentation mode now.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. So first, I would like to thank all my co-authors. There are many from many regions of the world, from Germany, Swiss, Colombia, and many other regions, even China. So that's quite nice. And my talk will focus on South America and the fires that are produced there and how those affect pollution. But first, a little motivation. So we start this project like in Colombia, which is quite strongly affected by PM 2.5. As you can see here, for example, we are seeing the yearly mean of PM 2.5 in Colombia and in Venezuela and Ecuador for 2019 and 2020, and you can see that there are specific regions that have a larger pollution, which in fact, if you know the region, you will know that in those regions, normally there are fires. And then here I'm showing, again, the yearly mean, but for different cities of our country, which is Colombia. And this line is the projected limit for the local law, and this is the standard limit of the WHO. So you can see not many cities are fulfilling or complying for this limit or the Colombian limit, and even less are really complying for this limit. And the question will be, what are the drivers of this pollution and why is it increasing or being large, although it seems to is getting down? And the answer are fires. So here I'm showing the number of hotspots that you can have every year as a mean, simply taken from films. And here I'm showing the PM 2.5 that can be produced by those fires. I took this from CAMS and with another filters that I will talk about later. But what is quite interesting is you can see that the pollution regions are very much in line with the hotspots or the fires. And these dots are the three of the biggest cities in Colombia. But something that was quite interesting was the fact that this was known. So Mendes and Ballesteros said that there are fires in from the north that can affect different cities in the country. But no one have never said that there are these fires here in the Amazon. So this is a place at the north of the Amazon that can produce also a lot of pollution. And this was kind of surprising at the beginning. So in fact, if I calculate the correlation between the fires at the time that they are happening and the pollution and how it is evolving, there is a very strong correlation. And this is what I'm showing here. And the dots are the statistical significance. And this region here is named Caquetá. And this is even a smaller part, but and here I'm showing the city, but also the fires or the hotspots, and that there are plenty every year. And it was quite surprising because no one really have shown that the Amazonian can affect many other regions. Like, and in fact, it was even worse because if you track the pollution, so here is an example of a pollution plume that it can be tracked. So here is Colombia. These colors are the PM 2.5. To the right, it evolves in time. These are the cities. And here I'm showing the values on the ground, on the stations in the ground. So purple is the star and blue is the circle. And if you see that this plume is growing and the dots, the pink dots are hotspots or where the fires are being produced. And you see that when this plume touches Bogota, the purple line goes up quite strongly. It passes from almost 40 to almost 80 or 75. So it almost doubles. And when it touches Medellin, it also goes up, which is this circle. But then we also realized that in August, there could be some plumes that can start quite far in the Amazon, so in the Brazilian Amazon or even in the Peruvian one. And they can move north, combine with another sources of fires that can be developed here in the plains, and then arrive to the cities in Colombia. So in this case, for example, was Cali, which is this triangle and this green line. And you can even have values of 100. And before the fire the plume from the fire appeared, it could be simply 20 or something. So it's really affecting a lot the pollution in the region. So we ask ourselves, if this happened to Colombia, maybe this could happen in other regions. And in fact, if you remember this year, we had a very strong wildfire in the Amazon. And there were many images in which you see this. So you can see this blurry part. This is from NASA, this blurry contour, let's say, that's a plume of pollution. And you can see that more or less the Amazonian is here, but it could travel even to, or even get to Uruguay or to Argentina and so on. So they can travel really, really, really long distances. So we ask ourselves, okay, if Colombia can be affected, maybe other cities can be, and we would like to know which cities are being affected for fires that can or develop in the Amazon. So what we did was we have this Lagrangian tracker that can follow pollution plumes for PM2.5 that work like this. So if you are seeing here an animation, you can see these contours are fires and the colors are PM. And you see that it grows and sometimes it starts to go out. Even if you, for example, stop here, the south of Brazil is getting affected. Sometimes it touches Uruguay. Paraguay is very strongly affected. In some cases, Argentina, Peru, Ecuador, or even Colombia, right? And to do this, what we did was we track with a watershed algorithm the pollution plumes. And then we filter those that their onset is at least 60. So the 60% of the area of the plume started inside the Amazon. And as I say, it's quite, you can, even in this, there are only 2 months in this animation. For August, you can see that pollution can get into Argentina. In this, you will see like a tail of pollution that comes even here to the ocean. And in some cases, it can enter some regions of Colombia or Ecuador or the east of Brazil. So it was quite interesting, and we wanted to pursue this to see how these cities are being impacted by these fires. So the first thing we did was, okay, let's see how is the seasonality of those fires. And you can see that the majority of them happen at the south of the Amazon and at the east and west. But also that in December, January, and February, there is this very strong signal in the part of Colombia that we mentioned earlier, that was, or is Caquetá, that affects a lot pollution or the cities in the country. And then if we take only the plumes that are produced from the fires here, and we see their seasonality, and here I'm showing PM again, so the colors are PM and the contours are the number of fires, so it's basically putting this here. You can see that the fires can affect a lot of regions in Colombia, in Ecuador, in Paraguay, Argentina, and so on. And it's even worse here. And if you saw the fire or images from NASA from the fire that happened this year, you will see this tail happening, which is quite now close to what you will see would happen with many, many, many plumes that develop in the Amazon. But you will also, and maybe, so this is very, it's not nice, but the result was very nice in the sense that we were right in our hypothesis. That's why the cat is happy. That it really, there is a impact there that it's worth studying. So if you do the same, right, but now for 2019, you see all the fires and calculate the mean of the pollution of the fires in 2019, you again see this tail and this tail again that gets into many places of the north of Argentina and even in the central part of Argentina. So it could be very damaging. And in fact, you can also see in 2020 that the fires were very, very strong. And that's one of the reasons why during COVID-19, at least in Colombia, the PM increased at the beginning of the lockdown. But you also see something quite sad, that our tracker has a problem. So if we want to really quantify the impact of these plumes produced by the fires, we need another way to disentangle their contribution, because if you see, for example, here in 2021, there is some pollution here. And that this is clearly not something that can be produced by fires here, because normally what will happen is that the plumes here will move to the south. So what's happening is that the plumes sometimes grow so much here and combine with the plumes that are starting here, that also some intrusions that are coming from the Atlantic can combine. So you will have a merge of many, many things there that we need to account for, right? That's why we have this sad cat here. But then we say, okay, first, and before doing anything, let's see if there is really a correlation between the plumes, that it seems that it is, but let's quantify it, and the fires, right? Which is what I'm showing here. This is the Pearson correlation, which in many places is larger than 0.5. For example, here, as we were expecting in Caquetá, also here. Here at the south, and even in Paraguay, and again in Peru and parts of Brazil. So that was more or less expected. But then we said, okay, now we know that there are fires and there are pollution plumes that are managed to arrive to different cities. So let's count on average for each season how many of those fires that develop in the Amazon manage to get to the cities, to the principal cities. So we have the capital of Colombia, which is Bogota. We have Sao Paulo. We only had one station in Bolivia because, okay, the air quality network there is maybe a little bit difficult to use. We have Guyana, which is at the east. We have Victoria in the Amazon, Montevideo in Uruguay, and Lima in Peru. So you can tell that in these two seasons, there are many fires, for example, in Bogota, and also in DJF, that we were expecting that because of the Caquetá fires. But you can also tell that there are many cities that get affected a lot every year, because this is basically the mean of the seasonality for each season. So you will expect normally to have 5 plumes from the Amazon getting yearly, every year or every season in DJF to Quito. But then Bolivia, Victoria, and even Montevideo are not really that much affected, right? But the other cities are affected at all. But now we wanted to contribute, or to see what is the contribution of these fires to the pollution. So taking out, let's say, the local contribution or the regional contribution, and only think about the fire contribution. And this is what we did here. So there is this paper of Cosworth that they have 4 methods to calculate the baseline of pollution based on how it evolves and many other things. And we calculate the 4 of them. Here I will show only one, or I use only one, but they are very, very similar. And then the excedence of that baseline, you could, in a way, use it as a proxy for the contribution of pollution, or of the fires to this, for the amount of pollution you are seeing. So in Bogota, and you can calculate it per year and per season. So in Bogota, every year you see an impact, but there is also quite strong. So 68 is basically 3 times more than the local limit, and like more than 10 times more of the standards of the WHO. But something that I find quite surprising was that for the cities that normally are not very affected by the fires in terms of frequency, the value of, or the concentration of the PM is quite large. So it's 71, which is a lot, for example, here in Bolivia, could be 55 in Vitoria, 95 in Montevideo. So although they are not very frequently affected, when they are, the pollution grows quite strongly. But in the case, again, of the cities that are quite frequent, they are also very large in terms of impact, although it's not that bad in many cases. Like here, there is 14, which is bad, but it's not incredibly bad. But again, this is only a proxy. So we want, and this is work in progress, we want to do simulations. So we are using WorfChem, and the idea is to do 3 experiments. One is simply the control, in which you allow the conditions of 2020, 2021, and 2022 to develop normally in terms of fires. But then you run the same simulation, but you remove the fires from the Amazon. And then you run again, taking out the fires on the whole South America. So in that sense, you can see what is the real contribution of PM2.5 to the different cities that we have. But also, we can even calculate the health burden of that amount of pollution that we are producing, or that is being produced from the Amazon and moved to the principal cities. And to not get or finish this in a negative tone, the other thing that we are doing is trying to see how the fires in the Amazon or in the different parts of the Amazon are evolving. And quite nicely, you can see that there are cities, like maybe not Colombia. Colombia seems to be increasing the number of fires. So here what I'm showing is the amount of emission per year in the Amazon due to fires. So if you see, for example, Colombia, you see, okay, the amount of emissions was a little bit low, and then it started to grow, especially in the last years. And in Brazil, the same happened, and it seems it's because of policies. Although this is only until 2022, but there are many regions that have a very strong decrease. For example, like this one, Ecuador a little bit, Venezuela. Okay, in general, there are many regions that have been decreasing, and it seems, although I'm not sure, and we are still looking at it, that is because of the policies. And there is a paper that already said that it seems that it's the policies, but we want also to be sure. So if you manage to reduce fires with policies, that will be nice. We also saw that the protection regions, the regions that are very highly protected, also don't have fires. So that helps. Unless, like in the case of Brazil, that basically all the protection was removed for part of it. So that's why in the last years it was increased. So there is hope, let's say, to decrease the number of fires. We will also help a lot in reducing the amount of pollution, as you could see here, that the impacts are very large. So yeah. So as some conclusions, we know that there are many plumes that develop in the Amazon due to fires that get into multiple megacities in South America. Although we don't have data from Paraguay, for example, that country is one of the most affected. And the plumes that get into those cities can even increase pollution more to 60 or 70 or 80 micrograms per meter square. And something quite surprising was that although there are cities that are not very frequently affected, when they are, the amount of pollution is very high. And last, I would like to acknowledge my scholarship, which is a Marie Curie Fellow. And this is the grant I have to put every time. And this is my contact, my 2 emails. And are there any questions? And thank you.
Hi, Alejandro. Thank you so much. Very interesting talk. Yes, we do have some questions from Julieta Juncosa. She says, hi, Alejandro. One interesting feature of cities like Quito or Bogota is that they are west of the Andes, which acts as an important physical barrier for the transport of these wildfire plumes. Does your model include that physical barrier If so, is that the PM 2.5 near the surface or lofted high in the atmosphere? This city also have strong anthropogenic emissions, which I believe would be the primary local source of PM 2.5. How do you separate the contribution from fire versus local emissions for the cities?
So the first question is yes. So if you see here, for example, this is a good example, in fact. So if you see here how this is growing, right? This plume, there is a gap in this region, and it's because of the Andes. So you have the Andes, and that's why you have some blockage. But still, even with the blockage, there are many cases in which pollution can enter there. Especially, for example, for Bogota, which is so high, at 2,600 meters over sea level, it gets affected. No, so I suppose if I remove the Andes, it will be affected even more. But even as it is, realistically, it gets affected. And the second question was about the local sources, right? So that's hard, in fact, and I tried to do it slow. I did a proxy here, which the baseline, right? So this paper so I don't want to get into details, right? But if you go to see this paper, they have 4 methods to calculate the baseline, which is more or less the local pollution produced by road transport, by industries, and so on and so forth. But this is a very crude proxy. So what we should do, in fact, and is what we are doing, is you have an emission inventory, and obviously will not be perfect, but it will be more or less good. And then you can, when you remove the fires, you can know what is exactly the difference between these two simulations, and then you can have a very good estimate of what is really the contribution of the fires only from the Amazon. Of course, you will have fires outside the Amazon, right? Which is why we did do this, in the sense to really know what is exactly the contribution of all fires, but also only the ones from the Amazon. So that will be the way that we are planning to overcome that issue. But we tried here with a proxy, which I wasn't happy about it completely, at least. So that's why we are doing this.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. Hai Hui Su, is there any effort in the coupling impacts from policy and climate change to study the climate change impact to PM 2.5 exposure in South America?
I'm not completely sure, to be really honest. I know there are many efforts to try to improve the emission inventories, because our emission inventory is not the real best. So very hard to talk about climate change if you don't know really well how your emissions are. So I don't know. I honestly not. I don't think so, but maybe. But I'm not completely sure. At least no one that I know is working on that. So it would be a very good topic to study.
There is another question from Karen Bora. Thanks for this interesting talk. I was wondering if there are any nonlinear effects that you consider in your WRF-Chem simulations with and without fire emissions.
Like internally, a model have many nonlinearities, right? And many parametrizations that try to come up with those. And for example, with the position, right? The position, that's not really linear. But like exactly everything, it's kind of hard to, like even the advection equation is not really linear. So WRF is very, very, very nice because of that. It's quite useful. It works very well when you validate it. It's quite nice, and it quite works. Like the errors are very small. There are plenty nonlinearities that you need, like WRF accounts.
Okay, we have 2 more questions. From IARSA. Dear Alejandro, thanks a lot for your presentation. In the regional air quality networks in South America, I understand that the plumes correspond to PM 2.5 than to PM 10. Have you considered differences in their transport when comparing both fractions in relation to the fire events?
Yeah, so I did the same for PM 10. I didn't here. Yeah. So this is a composite of all the plumes that develop in the Amazon for PM 2.5, and this is for PM 10. And it's basically the same. It's very, very, very similar. You see a very strong difference if you do it for ozone, because ozone dies faster, it seems, so it cannot really get too far. But in terms of PM 2.5 and PM 10, they are basically very, very similar. Yeah, you can see that basically all the peaks are in the same locations. And if you split them by seasonality, it's basically the same. So yeah, there are not many differences between the two.
Okay. And finally, Maria Paula, just to clarify, did you remove the Amazon part from the countries where you count the frequency of the plumes? Talking about the countries that share the Amazon.
No, can you repeat? I didn't got it.
Yes. Did you remove the Amazon part from the countries where you count the frequency of the plumes?
I'm not completely sure what that means. So here, I suppose. So what I did was, you have, so let's say you have, there is one plume developing, right? In the Amazon. And then you see how that plume evolves, right? And if it touches Bogota, in the same moment in the ground station, you are seeing peaks or a strong increase in pollution, that counts as a pollution plume that got into Bogota, right? So I'm not really removing the countries or anything. I'm counting the number of plumes that arrive to the city, and that when they arrive to the city, the value in the station of pollution is increasing fast and gets into a value that is higher than certain percentile. I hope that, I don't know if I responded to your question, but let's hope I did.
Okay. In case we can contact to each other afterwards.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you so much, Alejandro. We'll move to a break now of 10 minutes. Afterwards, we'll have the icebreaker session with all ECRs. Please, you're very welcome to attend. And you can go and have a look at the information on the IGAC working groups, activities, other sister organizations, and last talks on the Gather Town application. So you're also welcome to go over and look at the main hall to see all other posters of the organizations. Yes, so we'll see you in 10 minutes. We'll have a break and we'll start with the ice breaking session afterwards. Thank you so much to the speakers.